of the year from 2019 from the Arizona Star. Do you have a .com that I can call out to? Tucson.com. She's an investigative reporter, so she's got those chops. She's bounced back and forth from sports to everything else, very well-rounded. Please welcome Caitlin Schmidt.
A smattering.
And this guy I've known since I moved to Winston-Salem in 1988, longtime columnist for the Greensboro News and Record. How many times have you won this award now, Ed? 5-time winner, Ed Hardin. Give you a couple of microphones unless you want to yell. If I can get pass that one over. And here you go. Have fun.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. All right, we're not going to do talk radio, so buckle yourself in. Investigative reporting is the nuts and bolts of newspapers, television, radio, everything. Everything is investigative reporting. So it sounds big, it sounds intimidating. It's really not. You know, people like their name in the paper, just like anything else. They really will work with you, even though they're really working against you. People like being interviewed, so to a point anyway. So, but that's, you know, if I had any advice to tell you, well, right off the bat, lawyers love their name in the newspaper. You know, just saw David. Lawyers love to be quoted. And the second thing I'll tell you is everybody's going to lie to you. You're going to know they're lying to you. They're going to know they're lying to you, and they're going to do it anyway because they don't trust the media as such. It's getting worse and worse, harder and harder. Not just that last administration. This administration is no better at opening up. That's true of schools, professional franchises, college franchise, you know, whatever. They want to tell their own story. They don't want you telling their story. They want to control the story. And it's your job to tell it for them, quite frankly.
Yeah, and if you stick around in sports long enough, you are going to have to investigate something. At some point in time, it is going to get dirty for your team, and it's better off to know how to cover it than to have to bring in a ringer, because that's how I got into sports. I was our police reporter at the Arizona Daily Star for several years and moved over to local government right around the time that the University of Arizona started getting into trouble with coaches and college football players accused of misconduct, and it was a pretty big deal over there. I did a lot of reporting on the Title IX issues at the U of A, years worth, in fact, to the point that I got really tired of it and wanted to look at other schools that have made some improvements, and so that's kind of the larger project I took on. But during that time, I helped cover the FBI investigation into the basketball team over there, and it's pretty nonstop. I don't go more than a few months without hearing from either an athlete who has something that they want me to look into, or somebody who wants me to look into something involving athletes. So it is very much a part of my beat. I put some tip sheets up there with some really good websites for anybody that's interested in doing this kind of stuff. You can check those Title IX complaints on your university, at the Department of Higher Ed's website. They track them. They're legally obligated to track them. It's all public records. And financials are a great place to start looking too, right? Follow the money. Bowl games are nonprofits. They have to report their expenses. You can get some really good stories out of there. Dave was just telling us the other night that the bowl game that Wake Forest is going to, the media team has to stay off-site because it's like $650 a night at the team hotel. I mean, that's a lot of money for a nonprofit to be spending on hotel rooms. That's a story right there. So look into your bowl games. I strongly suggest you can check out to see if they're actually registered as a nonprofit, and see what they've been doing with their money, how much they're paying these people. It's usually an exorbitant amount of money. So, you know, people don't always want to talk to you for these stories, but they also don't want a no comments. So they often will talk to you. No comment is kind of a kiss of death. especially for universities. And they'll say as much as they can, but you know, a lot of times it's not much. And I think the one thing that we really have working for us, aside from public records, are that people are getting much smarter about what constitutes bad behavior, and they save everything. 5 years ago, when I started working with victims of these you know, either domestic abuse or who were mistreated by coaches on their team, they didn't really have a paper trail, so to speak, but now they do. Students are saving everything. They're taking screenshots, they are saving emails, and if you ask for it, it's a treasure trove. It makes your job really easy when they can just forward you the email chain with all of the responses from everyone. So definitely always ask. They don't usually know what they have until they start looking, so that's the first question I ask, is what kind of documentation do they have, because it saves you a lot of work requesting public records if they have it for you already. Yeah, so ask about those things. Those are kind of my big takeaways.
And just like anything else, Google is your friend. You know, just Google it. You're going to find out a lot right off the bat. Covering colleges has become a lot harder in recent years, and again, because one of the greatest sports information directors in this country sitting in the back of the room, he's not doing that right now for Wake Forest. You know, he was a great source of information for me for years and years. They're trying to tell their own story now, and they don't want to tell what you want to tell every single time. In this city, and again, using Wake Forest alone, I'll just tell you about a story. Wake Forest basketball player attacks his pregnant wife and fractures her spine. Clear cut. He did it. In this state, that's automatic 48 hours incarceration. Automatic. Well, the AD and the district attorney, DA, I'm sorry, in this city went to Wake Forest. The judge hearing the case went to Wake Forest. The jailer, the person who in charge of whether this person is literally going to come in here or not, went to Wake Forest. They immediately closed ranks. Bottom line is that kid did not spend a minute in jail. So there's your story right off. That's where you start from. Now, where's your first call? Well, the kid's not going to tell you anything, so you go to get the police report. Police reports are always wrong. Always. There's something in there that's not right. They're in a hurry, they're incompetent, they don't really understand what they're reporting, investigating. Just assume that it's wrong. You're going to have to ask the police, the investigator, tell me exactly what happened. Tell me. Don't read the report. More times than not, he will. And sometimes he'll hide behind the police PR communications director, but even then, they're going to try and tell you what they want to tell you, but you're going to be able to get what really happened. And then just start picking away at it. A thread here, a thread there. Your editor is going to say, I need it by tomorrow. And you're going to tell him, I'm not going to have it by tomorrow. I'm going to have it by the end of the week, if you're lucky. I've got one more phone call to make, one more phone call to make. This person lied to me. I got to go back to him and let him know that. Know what you're up against. It's you versus them most of the time. They don't want to tell you, and you're going to try and get it out of them. It's the hardest thing in journalism. Now, yes, this is under this great heading of investigative reporting, but I was a sports columnist for the last 25, 30 years. Every column I wrote was an investigative piece, one way or another. Because once again, you're pulling something out of people who don't necessarily want to talk to you about it. And if they do, they want to tell you their side of it. So, like Caitlin said, they have to tell you most of the time. They have to. These are public records. There are laws, and they're all on the side of the press. From the days of Thomas Jefferson, we have more power than the government. We have more power than the average person. They have to tell you the truth. And if they lie to you, you're going to report that.
Yeah, and they do a lot. It's happened a lot, unfortunately. Court records are also your friend. While things may not be reported to the police as crimes, people can still file suit about them later. I've gotten some amazing scoops out of lawsuits, federal lawsuits. We had a really big one in Arizona several years ago because Title IX is a federal law. So those cases are tried out in federal courts. So there was a great one a couple years ago by a woman who was abused by her boyfriend, who was a football player, not a very good football player, but boy, they went to great lengths to protect him over there. But when she sued, she wanted to see if there was a pattern of abuse on the team by the coach at the time, which was Rich Rodriguez, and that lawsuit blew up. I found out from that lawsuit, discovery dispute hearings are a great source of information. It's where both sides have to argue in front of the judge if something can be admitted to the case. We found out about a gang rape that way, that the U of A had kept buried for 5 or 6 years. It resulted in no arrests, but 2 players were kicked out of school, as well as an equipment manager. And when I started nosing around for it, the comms person over there told me, "Oh, Caitlin, don't believe everything you read in lawsuits. People can say whatever they want." 7 months later, I finally found the police report. I actually had to get the dates of birth for every player on the roster for the past 5 years to request police reports that way, and I found it. And that same media person that had told me not to believe everything I read in lawsuits actually was in the police report because he met the police when they came to talk to these football players. So he stone cold lied to my face and knew it, and the relationship was pretty damaged after that. But I mean, really, who cares at that point in time? If this is somebody who's willing to lie about something like that, and we got a huge story out of it, and they made some pretty big changes. You know, I'm sure things are still happening, but those lawsuits. So if your university is the subject of any kind of Title IX lawsuit, most of them have been at some point in time or another. They usually get settled. I would request those transcripts if you can for those discovery dispute hearings. They're not ridiculously expensive, but you will get a wealth of information. And if you can attend the hearings, go for it. Most of them are telephonic now, so it's harder, but it certainly is worth the legwork on those.
If anybody has any questions, just put your hand up.
Yeah,
But
we're all working on it. Any problems?
sure.
Yep, yeah, there's a lot of filtering going through like the foundations and through alumni associations. You know, it's really tough. Luckily, in this wealth of money and knowledge, there are usually people that want to whistleblow on these kinds of things, and when you've been covering it long enough, they know who to come to. So I just say, put yourself out there, form these relationships, go to these events, start talking to these people, board members, that sort of thing. The board members that are usually newer or haven't been there longer will be the ones that are more likely to speak up. But yeah, the colleges have gotten to savvy onto what people are looking for. That's for sure.
And private schools are another thing altogether. I mean, it's just, you really do have to get to know the people. I mean, that's just the only way to do it. It's the only way to do it. It takes time. So, yeah.
You know, I mean, they kind of just fall into your lap a lot of times, and you have to be ready for them. But if it's something you wanna build on, I would put a story out there. I started investigating youth sports leagues pretty early. There's a ton of money floating around out there, and readers are really interested. They either have kids that participate in those leagues, or they know kids, and they don't like to know that their money's being wasted. So I started looking into one of our youth football leagues out there, found out that they weren't filing tax returns, put that story out there, and then people started coming to me to look into other things. So, you know, if you want those to kind of fall into your lap, I would say dig around a little bit and find one. And that one is a great place to start. You'll get a lot of bad tips. I mean, there's a lot of disgruntled people out there, but if you cast that net and put that story out there with your name on it, people will come looking for you to speak their truth on those.
Yeah, sometimes it just literally lands in your lap. All these people have enemies, rivals, whatever. The North Carolina academic scandal blew up because of an NC State website, fan site. You know, they printed Julius Pepper's transcripts or something. it all went from there. Every sport's different, every school's different, every story's different, obviously. I covered NASCAR for several years. The way you cover NASCAR is kind of like the way you cover politics. You play drivers off of each other. Hey, did you hear what that son of a bitch said about you? You know? And then you go to him, hey, did you hear what he said about you? So it's just like, don't be afraid to play them off of each other. You're going to find out the truth somewhere is somewhere in between. So, yeah.
It's kind of more of a fun question, but who's the weirdest, the strangest tip, I guess, from your perspective that's led to an actual So, for example, the NC State Brown, NC State White side, transfers go, is there something that sticks out?
Trying to think. I mean, not sports related for me. I got a tip about some nepotism going on at the sheriff's department, and it led to the discovery that they were misusing federal funds, and a bunch of people got fired. And that was totally just a disgruntled employee who was mad that they didn't put out a bid. But you know, you never, yeah. Sports ones are all pretty straightforward to me. You know, it's somebody coming and complaining about misconduct. But let me think about that one.
These things don't always come to resolution, first of all. They always don't come to the resolution you're after. The Carolina thing is a perfect example. Ultimately, all that happened was, well, the president resigned, the chancellor resigned, the football coach resigned, and a bunch of players got transferred and were found, you know, ineligible to play college sports anymore. But bottom line is, they got away with it. The whole academic scandal at Carolina, they got away with it. NCAA had no, as it turned out, had no power to go after the thing they wanted most, and Carolina played that against them. And I mean, Dan Kane at the Raleigh News and Observer had probably 2 or 3 of the best years of investigative reporting I've ever seen in my life, and he was the only one doing it for a long time. So Dan Kane was the enemy of the people in Chapel Hill, and is to this day, as am I, and anybody else that covered that nonsense. But bottom line, they got away with it. Auburn got away with it just last week, scot-free. You know, they got rid of the assistant. They didn't get the recruit they wanted, but they got slapped on the wrist. So everything, you know, covering the NCAA is a big thing now, because they're taking a step back. There are a lot of loopholes to get around it, and you know, I think it's going to be, now that you can gamble and pay athletes, my God, it's over. You know, it's never going to be the same again. Yep.
If you're lucky, it'll take a week. I mean, I've had stories that I've been working on for months. It just, a lot of it depends on how long those records take to get. Our university takes so long to produce records that I just don't ask them for anything anymore. I mean, they have taken 18 months to give me a "we can't tell you" attorney-client privilege. I mean, that's ridiculous. And we have no legal recourse except to sue them, and my newspaper doesn't have the money for that. So I look for ways to go around it. I feel like a week that's a fast one, really. So, but yeah, once you get into these, be prepared to live in it for a while and follow it for a while, especially if you're following something that's playing out in court. I mean, that can drag on for years.
Yeah. And more times than not, you're going to have a quick story. You know, there's a story that says, here's what's happened, here's what's going on. That's where your investigation begins. That's when they're going to really start putting up roadblocks. And that's why it's going to take a week, 2 weeks, a month, even more. And again, you may not get to the end of it. It just may be a rabbit hole. So just don't stop. Be dogged.
And you don't always get the resolution you want for certain. You know, even if people get fired because of something that you've written, if the university doesn't say this is why these people are losing their jobs, it sure doesn't feel good. I did an investigation last year about the cross-country team at the University of Arizona really mistreating the women on their team, and they fired 3 people, but didn't ever say, and we fired these people because they were treating these athletes poorly. You know, they did the right thing, but if you don't say that you're doing it for the right reasons, I mean, can you really take credit, right? So Yeah. So hopefully everybody's state has some sort of First Amendment coalition type group that will work with newspapers. A lot of times, honestly, it's as simple as a letter from an attorney, and they'll cough it up. We use that a lot, but sometimes you just have to give it up. Like the University of Arizona is very well aware that we're not going to sue them at this point. They know that we're not going to. Unfortunately, the law firm that is our First Amendment coalition has represented Arizona State, and so they are conflicted out and can't handle anything involving the U of A, which is a huge problem for us. But look for those employees or those students that will talk to you and get you documents. A lot of times I've been able to find them through other people. So.
And FOIA is always FOIA. So. Steve? I mean, I hope it's unusual. That's the big one. That's the big example. That was, in my opinion, that was editor driven. The editor at the N&O wanted that story, and he wanted it to be that story. And he got a columnist on his side, and she wrote it. She wrote the heck out of it. And here's the thing about that case. If you remember the details, the Duke Lacrosse invites an African American woman to a party, and she claims that she was raped, and it blows up. Next thing you know, it's on court TV, and it's national. Two things about that. Yes, she was lying. Ultimately, those kids didn't do what she said they did. But they invited an African American woman to their frat room or whatever. They did that. They had no business doing that. What good could have come out of that? What good could have possibly come out of that? So that colored the whole thing. You know that true. They admitted that. So that's kind of where that story, it seemed to have guardrails, and they weren't the right guardrails. It was just a terrible situation that spiraled down. And then, like I said, now they're exonerated. Now they're choir boys. No, they're not. The truth is in there, but it's not exactly what came out.
And those stories do happen every once in a while. I had to cover a woman who was lying about being raped, and she accused Josh Passner of rape, and it was a huge story, and my editor sent me after it and said, get this woman's story. And I knew it was fishy, and I fought against writing that, and we wrote it. Our headline was so bad, too. It was like, woman says she's telling the truth about sex assault claims. And sure enough, it turned out that she's lying, and they're being prosecuted for it now. But that, I am still so mad that story has my byline on it. But there's not much you can do, but you can fight for it. At least, I know I fought really hard against that one and lost, unfortunately. But that also does not mean that I'm going to not believe everyone that comes to me and says that they've been victimized. You get a gut for this stuff really fast. You know when someone's lying to you. You just get better at knowing when someone's lying to you the longer you do this.
I mean, you're going to find out real quick if you're going to be a reporter. You better have thick skin. I mean, if you don't, you better develop it. And you do, in a way. You get calloused. And that's probably the best defense you have, is to learn how to take it. Because you're going to get calls at home, You're going to have people calling you at your house that you're investigating, or families of, or it can be scary sometimes. But you're the only one doing it. You have to do it.
And those fans get really mad. I mean, every time I write something, it's, why do you hate the University of Arizona? And I don't. I just want them to do the right thing. I went there. I graduated from there. I just want them to do better. So.
One of my first high school reunions, I was a young reporter at the Winston-Salem Journal right over here. And I'd written that this woman had shot her husband 5 times and killed him. And as soon as I walk into the party, I'm confronted by a classmate of mine from 10, 15 years earlier, pointing her finger into my chest. You did wrong by my friend. She was protecting herself. And I said, listen, she shot him 5 times in the back. That's what I wrote. That's what I wrote. So again, yeah, my name was on that. The truth was in there, but I just wrote I wrote the truth. That's all I did. And you have to stand behind it. The truth is powerful. Yep.
That's tough. I mean, yeah, I think it just depends on the person and how much time you're willing to spend with them too, right? I mean, for me, public records are everything. Documents are everything. So if someone's going to tell me a story, and I'm going to ask them if they have any evidence of it, and they can come back with an email chain, I mean, take what they give to you. If they're telling you about like the worst time in their life and you're checking it out and everything's credible, I'm probably going to be pretty apt to trust that person. If they're giving you half-truths or you're having to dig more, then be a little more careful. It's just different for every person, But go with your gut, really go with your gut. If you have a bad feeling about someone, there's probably a reason for that.
I mean, if you're the investigative reporter at a newspaper, for example, a lot of times you're talking to people you talk to again. The story is the story, and something else is going to happen. That one gets put away. And if they lie to you, they're never a credible source. Bottom line. If you're covering a school at your beat, it's the same people over and over. That's a different thing. If you're covering the NFL, remember when the Panthers stuff broke, 5 years ago, that Jerry Richardson turns out to be a piece of scum? He had people calling him Mr. Even the media called him the big cat. He was just this larger-than-life figure, and he turned out to be a total fraud. So, and that was broken. I'm not sure I should say this, but it was broken by a young woman who was one of us. She wasn't a reporter, but she helped us with a lot. She had a job where part of her job was helping us, go here, go here, go here. She's the one that blew the whistle on it. So a lot of times it comes right from the source itself, and you know it's true, and you have that on your side the whole time. Yep.
I mean, wording like any and all is really helpful, and use repetitive terms, because reports, documents, etc., just blanket terms, because if they see a loophole or a window to toss it, they will. Yeah, I mean, there really is no trick to speeding it along. And they're so bad, like at the University of Arizona, we try to do stuff to get around FERPA, like ask for, student athlete exit surveys, redacted names, and they'll still reject them. So databases are always good, and then you can find out what you need exactly. But unfortunately, like every time we get a new FOIA trick, they figure out a new way to get around it, it seems like. So, but yeah, the repetitive term one is the best one I've gotten. Yeah, just because, I mean, the rule that like they don't have to create something to give to you, and most of the time they won't. But if they categorize something as a report and you ask for it by a different name, they're not going to give it to you. So.
We were in Greensboro a few years back. We were looking into something at A&T, North Carolina A&T University, and we finally talked them into giving us what we wanted. And they brought it in a cardboard box the size of a washing machine, and it was full. It was printout after printout after. It took us a month and a half just to collate it, just to say, you take this stack home. And what we were looking for was in there, but they weren't going to help us. They weren't about to help us. In fact, they were playing a game with us. We got the story. Anything else? Closing.
I mean, question everything, and just remember, people maybe won't remember to offer things up. So always ask what they have. I've been shocked by what people keep. these cross-country women that I wrote about, once they started digging, somebody had kept a journal at the time, really well documented, with names and numbers and everything, and didn't even remember it until I'd asked, and she had her dad get it out of storage. So, yeah, just I've been shocked. I've been doing this for 8 years, and the amount of savviness by young people when they know they're being mistreated is really impressive. You all are sticking up for yourselves, but you're also keeping a really, really thorough paper trail, which makes our job much easier. But yeah, if this is the kind of reporting you think you want to do, if you want to be that for your community, I'd say get that starter story out there. Every town has a little league. Those parents pay a lot of money, and you'd be shocked at what's going on. It's ripe with theft. You have people that are doing free labor, and they sometimes like to pay themselves with real money instead of that sweat equity. So there's a reason that these volunteers turn around so quickly. So yeah, put yourself out there. People will find you. I don't go more than a couple months without hearing from someone now.
And more investigative reporters are going to be the most important people in this country. I mean, they're trying to take it away from us, that right to know. And they're going to win if it keeps going the same path it's going. So you're the most important writer in your city a lot of times, and you're the only one. But have guts, thick skin, be creative. No two investigations are the same. So believe it or not, have fun with it. It's really cool. It's a really cool job.
Yeah, you may not always get the story that you think you're going to, but you'll get a story out of there for sure. When the FBI basketball stuff was going on, we started requesting travel expenses just to see if Book Richardson was skimming off the top, and he wasn't. But we had a great little story out of it based about how much money Sean Miller had spent on travel to recruit nobody. So I mean, wasn't the story we thought we were going to get, but people got real pissed off at that too. So it's fun stuff. You're the most hated person in your town sometimes, but I sleep great at night.